Chapter 1. Long have the greatest minds of history contemplated the nature of the universe. Throughout time immemorial, the question, why, has vexed consciousness singularly and collectively, offering nothing but an ever-burgeoning enigma. The ancients created their own theogonies. Certainly all of this has to be ordered. Still others believe chaos to be the great ruler. Every time an explanation is given, there grows a multitude of additional gaps which do nothing to soothe the aching mind prone to inquiry. Gods and goddesses of old were created ad infinitum. Subsequently, these explanations have led to nothing more than ruin and curiosity. The purpose of this series is not to recount a history. The purpose is to define the undefinable, to unlock the secrets which bind us to scarcity, fear, limitation, death, and destruction. The goal, when realized, will liberate extraversal intelligence from the fetters which have trammeled it for time immemorial. The soul delights when senses are overpowered with majesty and beauty. There are places that have painted themselves so vividly upon our consciousness that we thirst for their joy and beauty. It is not often that we are able to live in such a place. Garamendia is a place where its inhabitants are afforded such a luxury. The city itself has stood for several thousand years. Built on the remains of an ancient crater, Garamendia is shielded from the high continental winds. Twin suns warm the city by day. Verdant gardens release their gentle fragrances, sensually enveloping the inhabitants. Along one edge of the city, a white sandy beach borders the shimmering sapphire of the ocean beyond. Cool winds blow across the ocean and into the heart of the city. Green spaces complement the modern structures. Buildings, plants, and animals are tended fastidiously. The clever juxtaposition of natural elements gives the whole city a feeling of bucolic serenity. Garamendians are known throughout their solar system for intelligence and innovation. Most of the inventions in the Aleph Beth solar system have come from this special place. There is a thirst for discovery and a sense of purpose residing in the hearts of her people. There is an abundance of food. The relative ease by which the necessities of life are gathered for another species might have left these inhabitants lazy and consumed with lethargy. Instead, the realization was made long ago that the pursuit of intellect and industriousness were superior to a hedonistic existence. You would think that such a highly advanced society would be free from all common afflictions. Sam had always been somewhat of a recessive strain of Garamendian. While the other young students were exemplifying the spirit of intellectualism, Sam found himself longing for the beach and his Zodder. Long relegated to the compendium of obsolescence, a Zodder is a wind and electric fan-driven craft. The Zodder hovers over land and sea using ducted fans. A mast supports a billowing sail, which captures the wind, driving it forward. While piloting the craft along the beach, he is often the recipient of unwanted attention. The advent of a well-riding technology has made atmospheric pressure manipulation vehicles, by comparison, slow and inefficient. Slow and inefficient suits Sam's personality just fine. Piloting the Zodder serves as an ever-remedial cure for his brand of melancholy. When a young man finds himself capable of nothing more than mediocrity, he adopts this attitude with a sense of pride. There is a freedom for Sam which comes from occupying this station. Young men among his peer group were constantly competing for status. Having long ago realized the futility of competing, Sam is free to traverse the interlacing realms of vision and imagination. In Garamendia, multiple generations live concurrently. In our culture, we lack simplified language describing a familial structure based on an intergenerational longevity. When a couple bears a child, they become parents. When their child conceives, they become grandparents. When this child conceives, they become great-grandparents. To another generation, they are referred to as great-great-grandparents. The language of Western European islanders, which strangely enough has become the common tongue on earth, lacks simplicity required for interactions between these multiple generations. The Garamindians have applied a naming structure that brings simplicity and endearment to these appellations. Each generation is named relative to the other generation. They do not prepend an entire word for each generation before the grand generation. Instead, they assign a numbering prefix to the name. The words for father and mother are far and mar, respectively. The following table lists the name ascribed to each family member based upon relative generation and gender. Garamindian: Enfar, father. Enmar, mother. Tufar, grandfather. Tumar, grandmother. Trefar, great-grandfather. Tremar, great-grandmother. Firfar, great-great-grandfather. Firmar, great-great-grandmother. Femfar, great-great-great-grandfather. Femmar, great-great-great-grandmother. Sexfar, great-great-great-great-grandfather. Sexmar, great-great-great-great-grandmother. The multi-generational family is another reason why the culture embraces intellectual pursuits. There is a living knowledge which lasts for multiple generations. Even on the planet Altion, children rarely listen to their first generation of parents. For our Garamindian brothers and sisters, selective hearing applies only to their Enfarmars, parents. When a dozen people speak from affection and experience rather than authority, the younger generation tends to listen. Garamindians embrace and learn from original mistakes, but do not tend to repeat them generationally. The generational pendulum concept has been observed and documented by the people of Garamindia. Having multiple generations living simultaneously allows the family members to reflect on the personalities of a much larger immediate family. Character traits tend to skip a generation. In this fashion, Sam's personality is aligned with his Tufarmars, Firfarmars, and Sexfarmars. This does not mean that he does not have a great relationship with all his elders. In fact, his affections might strain for the Trefarmars and Femfarmars, as they are typically a much wiser and kinder variant of his Enfarmars. The family home is built in a fashion which gives everyone privacy and accessibility. Each floor of the building is devoted to a generation. The youngest generation lives on the bottom floor. Younger families tend to come and go more frequently. Each floor is broken up into 3 living quarters. 2 units are used for the common families of that generation. The 3rd unit is shared and used for a variety of purposes. It might become necessary to breed a 3rd child unit to boost fertility rates. There might be visitors passing through who need a place to stay. Hospitality is highly valued and shared among the people living in the city. One whole level of the home is left uninhabited. This is the top floor. The great symbolism of the empty penthouse rings through the culture. When the penthouse is inhabited, it is because a Shufarmar generation has come to pass. Families with this longevity are honored and revered. When this occurs, an additional level is planned and built. Going back through the ancient record, it was noted that only after each additional level was added to the Garamindian home, generations began living longer. Advances in science and health care contributed in part to the lifespan of the people. There was a causality involved in the constant reminder of the penthouse. It placed in collective consciousness the possibility of a longer life. When the sadness of a generational death fell upon the family, part of each generation's mourning process would be to move up an additional floor. In the same way, the joy of a marriage found the same process would most likely occur. These traditions and rituals tend to occur with regularity in this society. This does not mean that there are not deviations or allowances for non-traditional housing. Up until recently, Sam still lived with his Enfarmars. His brother had already moved out of the familial home, moving into the home of his life partner's family. He preferred the proximity it afforded to the celestial observatory. Sam's cousin had already married and was living with his new life partner and child on the first floor. While Sam was very happy for his cousin, he felt the weight of expectation. His Enfarmars had grown tired of waiting for him to find the right one. After his 4th year at the metricule, his parents decided they would be moving out and up before his nuptials. In Garamindian culture, this is referred to as failure to bump. While this is not common, this does occur. He is the first failure to bump in his family in the last 1,500 years. In the center of the family courtyard rises the core vault. This small and formidable structure is cylindrical. The outer walls are constructed of a highly polished green quartzite. These walls are nearly 2 feet thick. The stone is known for its beauty and strength. The top of the outer walls is formed by crenellations in the stone. The spaces between the capstones are filled with a transparent roofing material, which allows people on the upper floors to see light emanating from within. The perpetual glow reminds the family of their story and who they are. Cores can be projected above the core vault as well as within. Within the core vault, a holographic simulator brings their ancestors to life. When a child comes into the world, a core is created. On this core is stored all personal data. Every moment of every second of every Garamindian life is recorded, stored, and analyzed. One of Sam's hobbies, other than riding on the beach, is to pore over the information in his family's cores. Seddon Tom is one of his favorite fars. After years of living alone and appearing rudderless, he found a life partner and settled down. While this appeals to Sam, he finds the greatest connection to Seddon Tom surrounding the vision. Seddon Tom was ridiculed in his own time for his repeated reference to the vision. Throughout his life, he told the following story. He found himself floating in the center of a vast darkness without the aid of a photon generator. This totality of darkness is one that only miners can know and appreciate. His vision goes on like this for what seems like an eternity. All at once, small, tiny, seething dots start to appear in all directions about his spheroidal plane of vision. The dots of white light are very faint at first. The distance seems vast between the luminescent points. Like bubbling of water in a pot beginning to boil, the lights grow and multiply until the light is blinding. It is at this point that Seddon Tom is transported instantaneously into his home. He finds himself seated between 4 screens and 4 cameras. He looks into each viewing screen, seeing himself and the opposite viewing screen repeating into infinity. Pleased by the intellectual oddity, he alters his likeness as would a child in front of a mirror. All at once his essence is fragmented into an infinite number of pieces and distributed among all the different screens visible and not visible. He feels like he is everywhere and at the same time nowhere. Here his vision ends. His family would attend his stories with laughter, but never sought understanding. Our visionary had lived to be a femfar when trefars were considered old.